So we are moving into the first special session of the convention. Very interesting theme, future of industry, capturing the 1 trillion opportunity in shifting global supply chains. Give us their perspectives in the special session number 1 on the theme, future of industry, capturing the 1 trillion opportunity in shifting global supply chains. May I now invite the moderator of the session, Mr. Soumyadeep Ganguly, partner and leader of manufacturing and supply chain practice McKinsey. And joining him in this session are Mr. Rahul Mammen Mappillai, Managing Director, MRF Limited, and Mr. Sriram, Viji, Managing Director, Brakes India. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome all the three youngsters, the young leaders, with a big round of applause. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Please. Thank you all for being here. May I have the AV of the guest speakers, please?
Mr. Soumyadeep Ganguly, a partner in McKinsey's Delhi office, leads the firm's work in manufacturing and supply chain management in India. He works with the Government of India and major industries to set up innovation and learning centers to catalyze smart manufacturing using Industry 4.0 across sectors.
Thank you.
Rahul Mammen Mappillai is the Managing Director of MRF Limited. He joined the company as the Corporate Manager, Planning and Development in 2003 after completing his MBA at the University of Michigan. He has wide experience overseeing the finance and project functions, including the automation and process upgradation initiatives in the company. Mr. Sriram Viji is the Managing Director of Brakes India, a company that he leads with vision, strategy, and wisdom. With over 15 years of experience in management and consulting roles, he seeks to position Brakes India as a global leader in delivering innovative and high-quality solutions for complex and safety-critical applications.
So, Sriram, Rahul, thank you for patiently listening to me. So let me start with you, Sriram, right? While, as we were discussing, there are a lot of opportunity, we are doing great and so on and so forth. But having said that, as an Indian manufacturer who is exporting to the world, are you seeing that our image as a low-cost country and not so great in quality, but low-cost go to India, is that really changing? Are there some fundamental shifts we are making? What would be your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Soumya. I think definitely, a very valid question because we are seeing some of that shift. We work in the automotive component space, right? So we have been exposed to a lot of the perception of how global companies think of India as a sourcing base. And even, 7-8 years ago, the charts we would see were comparing India on a price parity basis with other countries. And we were always, below, right? So China was more expensive than India. Other countries are more expensive than India, but we were not getting the business, right? Even though on a cost basis, we were lower. And this is very rightly, as you say, a combination of factors that enables India to realize its potential. It's not just a low-cost base. I think there is a level of quality we have to meet. There is a level of scale we have to meet. And there's a level of trust we have to build with these people. And that is changing very quickly. I think if you look at scale, right, one of the factors, India as an economy has grown tremendously in the last 7 to 8 years, and it has a lot more potential. With 20 million two-wheelers, 4.5 million, passenger cars and utility vehicles, almost 500,000 trucks and buses being manufactured in India today, we cannot complain about scale. We are at a scale where we should be competitive. We should be at the levels that global OEMs want to source from us in India, right? So that, I think, is a very big change and a very big factor that will help propel this growth even further. The other thing that's changed is, I think, from a trust angle, right? You also mentioned this. I think other countries are starting to set up bases in India. So whether it is auto majors through their international purchase organizations, they are starting to get comfortable with the culture of India and operating in India. And I think that's a huge difference, right? When you look at different options to purchase from, let's take China as an example because we're compared very often. US has been wedded to China for over 2 decades now, and this didn't happen overnight. They've had people there there have been Americans who visited China multiple times in the late 80s, 90s to build that trust. And India started that journey much later. So I think we are still on that trust building journey. In our discussion earlier, we were talking about the varied levels, even within Indian companies, of what they can expect on quality, on scale, on trust. So I think that is changing as well. The other thing is, globally, I think we've all read that the world is flat, right? I think we've been exposed to that concept. It's not as flat as we thought it was. And I think that risk-reward relationship changes over time. Risk was very low in 2010 to 2020, let's say, post the financial meltdown. Risk was low. So this gave an opportunity for global scale to be built, global trade to really accelerate. We've realized with COVID, with a lot of the geopolitical tension, there are ridges, there are valleys. It's not as flat as we thought. And it's some of this rebalancing where we really have some opportunity to garner where India can be on this global scale, right? So there are a lot of positive factors, and I think the domestic scale is one that will really help us go through. But it's not to say that India is not perceived as a low-cost manufacturing company. We are still perceived as a low-cost manufacturing country, and we should be, right? I think where we are on the GDP curve, while 2047 looks great, we are still at 2024, right? And we have a long way to climb up that graph, as you said, a lot of hard work. So I think we have to leverage some of the strengths that we have. While we do have software talent, while we do have a lot of innovation happening in India, we're not at global scale there yet. And I think leveraging some of that low-cost expertise, low-cost manufacturing will help us go up that curve. And that's one of the areas we as a company are trying to push, is that we can build global scale, we can provide global quality, but we will do it with an arbitrage of the Indian talent base, the lower cost that we have.
Wonderfully said, Sriram. I really like the way you mentioned it, right? Probably some time back we were low cost but still not getting considered. Today we are considered at quality with a low cost and shown the potential with organizations like you. Thanks for that, Sriram. Rahul, let me come to you. While low cost and all as an element, we are seeing that India is getting leveraged as an R&D center, right? We are seeing people are moving their core R&D here. And you lead an organization who has always been known for innovation in the area. What would be your thoughts? How this R&D is shaping up? And how do you think this can be an advantage for us?
So thank you, Soumya. And I do agree with you. It's a big opportunity. But from my perspective, for Indian companies to make use of the opportunity, there has to be a change in mindset, right? If you see, historically, our mindset has been, we're given a benchmark of a multinational product, and we have to match that, right? But now, I feel the mindset has to be that we have to set benchmarks of our own, right? And it's easier said than done, right? And I'll tell you the way we are approaching it, right? So if you have to create new benchmarks, it's very clear our engineers have to be allowed to experiment and fail, right? So unless you experiment and fail, you can't create new benchmarks. So what we have actually done is we've actually put money behind what we're talking about. We actually built a factory only meant for our R&D engineers to make tires, right? And their tasks are go out, try crazy stuff. If 1 out of 10 work, that's something new for us. So that in itself allows experimentation, right? And once you are able to create new benchmarks, and the OEs say that I don't have to set benchmarks elsewhere and come to India, then you become the first mover into an OE development, right? And once they're comfortable with that, and once you're the first mover, you obviously have an advantage, right? So I think that's the first step. As companies, we have to believe that our local talent can create something new, something innovative, and we'll support them with investment. The second thing I'm very clear we have to do is we have to invest in infra, right? When a global OE comes into India, the advantage he has operating abroad is that all his suppliers have world-class infra which they can use to co-develop, right? So now, again, what we are doing is we are building a test track in Trichy right now. It should be ready in 4 months' time. So in my view, a global OEM in India who doesn't have a test track now will feel comfortable coming to India because here he knows there's a tire company who they can test with, right? And once you build the infra and once you make them comfortable, that's when the true innovation happens. To me, setting up an R&D center here and outsourcing key operations is not what we want. We want them to actually develop new products in India. And for that to happen, we have to create the infra and encourage engineers to actually do stuff which could inevitably fail and allow experimentation. And that's, in my view, that's what we as companies have to do.
No, thanks, Rahul, for that. Thanks, Rahul, for that inspiring thought. We all have always learned this in our management education that we should be allowed to fail to innovate. But great to see leaders like you, Sriram, and all are actually doing it. And this is what gives us the belief that India will actually take this advantage. On this same, let me take the conversation a little forward on some of our strengths. Both you, Rahul, and Sriram mentioned our talent, our infrastructure, which is probably the strength we are playing on, Sriram. Right? How do you see that? Are you really seeing that we are being able to take the advantage of the talent and the infrastructure? And what would be some of your thoughts for all of us?
No, I think you laid out very clearly, Soumya, in some of the earlier slides about, the talent pipeline that India has, the demographic dividend, and, we're starting to see this in action, right? Definitely, we have access to people both on the shop floor as well as in engineering or, white-collar jobs. I think it's a great place to be in India. There's still a huge disparity, right? We've always talked about the skill gap in India over the last decade. And we see that in companies, right? So we have to hire from certain institutions. We were discussing earlier, BTech is not the same across the country, right? So there are a lot of things we have to do to bring up people, to bring up talent, skilling, education, re-education within the company. So there's a lot of work we do, right? But it is, I would say that demographic dividend is starting to pan out very much more realistically right now. I'll give you the example. We have a company we work with in Europe that we had acquired, small company, right? And they were struggling with manpower on the shop floor. And to get a CNC operator there, right, took them a month and a half to fill that role. To get a maintenance person who could handle robotics and automation, reprogram a robot, could not find. They had to go to an outsourced resource at about 2 times the price, right? Whereas I can tell you, if I had to replace that resource within India, I would have my pick, right, of people to choose from who are not just skilled and motivated, right? They will work so much harder than anyone in Europe will work today. So I think what we have to realize is we have a population that is increasingly getting skilled, but also a population that's really hungry to do well, right? And that is something that we cannot underestimate. So that 25% of people at a certain age is more than that, worth in terms of how those people work. So that is on the talent side. I would say we are starting to see that demographic dividend already start, and it will get more pronounced in the next 10, 15 years. The second one you talked about is infrastructure. India has had pretty poor infrastructure in the past, and we have struggled with logistics across the country, tax codes that were not necessarily easy to deal with in different parts of the country. So many manufacturers were subscale because they would put up plants close to customers, plants to overcome tax advantages. But literally in the last 6-7 years, we've had GST, like you said, UPI that's enabled payment for smaller cases. We've had, all the roadblocks that were there go away. But most importantly, we've had roadways, railways, all being invested in and infra really improving. We were talking about how GDP as a logistics cost as a percentage of GDP has come down, right? It really has. And we see that what used to take 4.5-5 days to go from Chennai to Delhi now gets there in 3 days. And the most important thing is the variation is extremely low, right? You're not worrying if that truck is going to reach Delhi in 3 days. However, we still have a long way to go. While we are happy with how things are going, we have a factory in Oman, and that is located near a port, right? And if we need to send export shipments from Oman to Europe, we are deciding whether to send it in the morning or the evening, right? Whereas in Chennai, if we're sending a shipment, is it Tuesday or is it Friday, right? So we still have a long way to go in terms of port infrastructure, airport infrastructure. We are making headway, no doubt about it, right? But we have a long way to go to get to world class in some of these areas. And that will also help India become both an export hub as well as lower our cost. The last one you had talked about is our digital infrastructure. I think internet penetration has really gone up in India, where we're starting to see, I think, the dividends of what the country has done with this aspect. Some of it driven by government policy, but some obviously by private sector and the need for people to get connected. UPI, what a change this is making to India as a country and the image of India internationally. When countries say they want to come and implement what India has done on payments and the digital, that just makes us proud, right? And I think that is the kind of marketing and the kind of strength that India really needs to focus on to become a player in the global stage.
So thank you, Sriram, for such a comprehensive answer to such an elaborate topic. I love the point you mentioned about our talent, that they're young and hungry. We just need to channel the energy in the right direction. Love the point about how we are developing on infra, but some of the places we are becoming bottleneck. That example I'm going to quote many places, Sriram, that morning, evening to Monday to Friday, and that makes so much of business difference as a country you are doing. And similarly on the digital infra. Thanks for that insight, Sriram. Rahul, let me come to you now. You know, while we are improving in many of the elements, in some places we are actually leapfrogging. Take an example of EV. I mean, what our OEMs are doing is just mind-boggling. How do you think that is going to play us, even if I look at auto component or India manufacturing as a whole? What are you seeing and what would be your thoughts on that?
So Soumya, I absolutely agree with you. What we are seeing in EV today in India is remarkable, right? And like you said, in two-wheeler and three-wheeler, I think we are by far the leader in the world. And being a supplier to them, they are going to be world leaders. So I think it's an automatic extension for us to be, as a component supplier, leaders in those two segments worldwide, right? But I want to give you the example of passenger car, right? And this is where obviously we are not a leader. We are more of a challenger, and companies like Tesla set the benchmark. But what I find remarkable with our Indian passenger car companies is that they're actually benchmarking Tesla, right? So their aspiration is to match Tesla at very frugal Indian prices. And that to me is an unbelievable aspiration to have. And what I'm hearing from my team is the cars they're making are unbelievable, right? And we have Mr. Velusamy just coming in, and I think Mahindra is an example of a company who's just set unbelievable benchmarks in EV technology. And the good thing for us as component suppliers is if we supply to companies like Mahindra who are benchmarking Tesla, we are actually producing tires which have similar features to the tires which are supplied to Tesla globally, right? So, and that in itself enables us to attack the EV market globally. So thanks to OEMs like Mahindra and the others in India, they're really pushing us to adapt technology very fast at a pace. And from what I'm hearing from the teams, the cars they're making are absolutely unbelievable. The born EV cars, I think, are going to set a benchmark in this country. So that's one. Second thing is also what I find is that the product development cycle of vehicles is changing dramatically. It was 48 months earlier. Now they want to do it in 20 months or 24 months, right? So that requires a lot of virtual development, right? And again, companies like I think the Indian companies like Mahindra are setting the benchmark there because it's pushing us to develop our capabilities there. So once we develop capabilities like that, then I think the Indian companies would be the best in the world to meet the requirements of the segment in terms of product requirement and timelines. And then I think then it's really up to us and the global manufacturers to see. And in my view, the first step would be to partner our Indian companies as they go globally. And as global companies manufacture in India, partner them. And then the third step would be to supply directly to them. But I think there's enough opportunity working with our Indian firms itself. It's a very exciting phase to be in.
So thanks, Rahul, for that. And this feels really good to hear that, we are setting up benchmarks, and Venue is already here. That we are setting up benchmarks and we are actually creating an ecosystem, Rahul, as you mentioned, right? That as this goes global, our entire ecosystem goes global, and really show to the world that India is the manufacturing hub. Look, I can go on with these two gentlemen for the full day, but Captain will not allow me to go. So let me come to both of you with the last question, Sriram and Rahul. Maybe Sriram, I'll start with you. With all of this, if there are few things you want us as to keep in mind, the nuances we should keep in mind to capture this opportunity, considering we have so many advantages, but at the same time, a hard work to do? What would be those 2-3 last thoughts from you?
Thanks, Soumya. So, tough question, I mean, to say what we need to do to get there, right? But I'll just reinforce that what we talked about at 2047, right, or even at 2030, is many years away. That is almost double our growth at 2030 and 2047 many times. So we are not there yet, right? We have to do a lot of work to get there. And it's at different levels. One is obviously international. Then there's our government level policy, our state policies, and then what we do as companies. So all these have to kind of line up for us to see that dividend that we are expecting to see in 2030 or 2047. So given that, I think alignment is key. You know, other countries, you see, when companies go to invest, we were talking about single window clearance for that company to come in, set up, they will support them the whole way. Whereas we still have, you know, national policy, state level policies, a lot of ease of doing business is still not the same in India. So I think that is definitely something we have to watch out for and make sure we have alignment as a country that we want to get there, and these are the things we have to do to change to get there. Again, we talked about the demographic dividend. It's there, but we have to invest in it, right? Whether it is education, quality of education, skilling. And one thing that often gets overlooked is the strength of our MSMEs, right? It's easy to talk about the big companies and the successes. We have to have a very, very strong, robust MSME ecosystem which can build the base. That is the most of India. That is where the growth is going to come from and will help the next level of companies also get the scale we need. You know, we export almost 1,700 crores. What we see, we get RFQs all the time. I think this was also touched upon in the previous session with our distinguished speakers. There are a lot of changes happening in the world, whether it is USMCA, you know, requiring sourcing from, you know, Mexico, Canada, North America as a whole, US, or whether it's CBAM, right, the cross-border carbon adjustment mechanism that is going to put tariffs on products outside of Europe coming in the automotive space. Now, while there are shocks that will, like COVID, that rebalance the economy of the world, there are also barriers that come in. And we have to be very cognizant of the fact that as a country, we have to address those trade barriers and how are we going to tackle them, right? Whether it is WTO, right, or whether it is changing our economy style. I think it's very appropriate at $2,500 GDP economy. We are not going to be investing in sustainability at the level Europe is. While we do make investments in solar, wind, long-term maybe nuclear, right, we have to chart our own path to get to that $10,000 GDP per person. So I think there are a lot of things that are changing in the world, and as a country, while we are positioned very well, that creating alignment for the entire country to capture that opportunity is very critical, right? So I think with that, I just want to say that in the next 5-7 years, if we don't get to that point of being aligned and getting on it, I think there's a big opportunity missed, because the world will go back to being a little bit more flat and things don't change, right? So it is only when there are these contours in the world that things flow to different levels. So we are at that opportune point. It is not a 1-year opportunity, right? It is a 5-year opportunity. So we don't have to all rush and hype it up and say, if we don't do it today, we're not going to get it. It is maybe a 5-year opportunity. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to put in that resource, put in the effort, build the base so that when these changes happen, we can capture them.
No, thanks, Sriram. So elegantly summarizing it that this is an opportunity, but this opportunity is not going to be there for entire lifetime. It's probably a 3 to 5 year window, and it's incumbent on us to actually work on that window and establish ourselves as a base so that we do it in a sustainable manner. Let me come to you, Rahul. I'll frame a little different question for you if you are okay. I think, look, you have always been known as the manufacturing excellence and so on and so forth, the R&D steps you are taking. Now, if I tell you that from running a plant with this India becoming a manufacturing hub, what are some of the things you think we still need to do right?
So Soumya, you know, to me, if India has to be a global manufacturing hub, if you ask me, the thing which is not spoken about enough is consistency, right? How can I ensure that every product I produce irrespective of which plant is manufactured from, irrespective of which line is manufactured from, gives you the same performance. I think that is, the key to be a global manufacturer. And if you look at the history of Indian manufacturing, when my grandfather or Sriram's grandfather set up their companies, we didn't have access to technology. We didn't have access to finance. We didn't have access to the best machines. So they had to really start with a major disadvantage, right? But today we have access to the best machinery. We have access to all the good stuff, AI, the works, right? But my view, stuff like that is not alone going to get you consistency. Consistency is a lot of common sense and a lot of hard work, right? And if I look at it, I would say there are two steps. First is culture, right? And to define culture in a very simple manner, every day in the factory, we are taking decisions which are always a compromise between quality and production, right? How do you ensure the same decision is taken right from the plant head to the workman? It's easier said than done, but that is culture. How do you make sure that always everybody in the organization takes the decision which is going to impact quality or which is going to help quality, right? That's step one. Step two is, I do believe we as managers or leaders, we are the biggest causes for variation. Like, let me just explain this to you, right? So assume you are a multi-plant operation, manufacturing multiple SKUs, right? And take, for instance, a tire. We have close to 20 or 25 raw materials going to a tire, right? Now, I have two options. One, I ensure that every plant gets the same source of raw material for one full year, or I have a situation where the raw materials keep changing from different suppliers every week, right? Obviously, option one is causes less variation than option two. But if you talk to our supply chain guys, they will refuse. They say, oh my God, I need flexibility, I have to get costs down, how can you do this to me, right? But there are ways of handling it. Like you can allocate one supplier to one plant, another supplier to other plant. Second thing is we go to the shop floor, right? You have an option of making an SKU in multiple lines. Can we allocate one SKU to one line, right? Again, very easy to say it, but your planning guys in the plant will say, oh, it's impossible, I have a breakdown here, if I don't have WIP there, I have to keep shifting it. Obviously, we make the same SKU in the same machine, day in, day out, you're going to improve consistency. And imagine when something goes wrong, right? When you have a quality issue, when you have multiple sources of raw material, when you have multiple machines making the same product, to problem solve, it's almost impossible, right? And so I think it's common sense stuff like this, which is very easy to say, but difficult to do. We as leaders have to make it happen. The second thing is now, because we have access to all this fancy machinery, I find many a time we are like these kids in a candy store, right? Somebody will come and say, oh, my new machine will reduce cost by 40%, will increase production by 50%, and a person like me will jump to that, right? So now you have different machines in different plants, giving you slight variations in quality. So I think India now is at a juncture where we've experienced everything. We know what technology is available. Now we have to be clear what is right, stick to it, focus on it. And our objective is, yes, all the fancy stuff is there, but the hard work of running a plant is a lot of hard work and common sense. Get that done. If we can get consistency right, I see no reason why India cannot become the world's manufacturing for any product in the world. So, and I think that should be our leaders as objectives, right?
Look, I must tell it's always an easy job to talk to this young gentleman because Rahul, you made it so simple yet elegant. Yeah. Culture of consistency, that's just, and get the basics right. And I can't, I was laughing when you said that sometimes we behave like kids in a candy store, and you will not believe some of the questions from the audience was exactly that how are you taking advantage of the IoT and all those new age machines and all, and you very brilliantly answer that. Maybe I'll take one question. I got a bunch of questions, Sriram and Rahul, from the audience I was just going through as you guys were speaking. I think one question which consistently came up and would love to get your views is, with this disruptions happening very regularly, whether it is COVID or sometimes, something happening in the Suez Channel or geopolitical shifts, how you as leaders are looking at these disruptions? That's one question, came out multiple number of times. Any thoughts on that direction?
Yeah, I think there's no rocket science here. You have to have you have to diversify geographical risk. Yeah? If you have a supply in Europe, try and get a supply in Asia also, so you're able to mitigate that risk. As far as possible, develop suppliers within India. there's no other solution, right? I think it's all about de-risking. And of course, look at your inventory norms. When things like this go wrong, you have to assume there are going to be variable lead times. So your safety stocks have to be higher. It's stuff like that. I don't think there's any rocket science. It's simple stuff, but we have to accept this reality. There are costs to it. We have to get it done. As simple as that. Yeah.
Sriram, any thoughts from you?
Just a quick thought. When you're thinking about risk, it's a good thing because you're already at a point where you're, at scale. You're not worrying about the other things. So when you're worrying about risk, you're already at a good point. Now, that risk-reward relationship I talked about is changing quickly. So I think people are realizing that risk is reasonably important. So from our perspective, honestly, almost every product will be manufactured at 2 plants. We will have the ability to shift capacities to a certain extent. That is within India. Now we're starting to think global risk mitigation, whether we need to have, as Rahul said, increased safety stocks or production locations that do some value add closer to customers. So a lot of that is coming to play. So definitely risk reward has changed in the last 3 years with COVID, supply chain disruptions. But I suspect the world will come back down on its risk profile in the next few years.
No, wonderful. Oh, thank you so much. Look, I have the tough job of trying to summarize what you have already summarized, but I'll still take a stab at it. First of all, thank you so much, Rahul and Sriram. This was an absolute pleasure to talk to you and debate some of the elements which we discussed. My takeaway is very simple, few points which you have mentioned. We are in an opportune moment. The opportunity is going to be for 3 to 5 years. We have all the basics ingredients ready, but there is hard work we need to do together to make it happen. Rahul, I can't repeat the point you said. Get the basics right. Get the basics right. It is going to be tough. Create a culture of consistency, create a culture of excellence, and leverage the huge talent we are having. They're hungry to become successful. I think the third takeaway I have had, and Sriram, I'm going back to what you said in the beginning. We were considered as a low-cost country always, but in many times we were not even considered, even after the cost. But we are in a point where people are looking at us, cost, but at the same time with the right set of quality, and we are at an optimized moment. And fourth, Rahul, you talked about some of the ecosystem which we are developing, like EV is a case in point, which can take us as a true global leader. At least that's what my takeaway, Rahul and Sriram. But it was an absolute pleasure to have a conversation with both of you. And thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Soumya.
Thank you.
Thank you, Soumya, for so fantastically moderating the entire session. Time for us to honor the dignitaries on the dais now. May I request Mr. Balraman, past President MMA, and Mr. V. Shankar, Senior Vice President MMA, to come onto the dais and honor the guest speakers, please. Mr. Mahalingam, President MMA, to join them, please. Ladies and gentlemen, these young leaders deserve a big round of applause. A lot of optimism there in what they spoke. With young leaders like this, I think our corporate are in very, very safe hands. And that was Rahul and that was Sriram, and we have Soumya receiving the award now. Soumya spoke about the 5 success factors for India to win. Rahul spoke how India is making a mark in the EVs. And Sriram talked about how we have a skilled but a hungry India as well, which is doing well. So thanks for all 3 of you for making this session so very interesting. Yep. May I request Mr. Apurva Bandhari also to come and join them on the stage. Mr. Apurva has given out these mementos, which are green mementos, planting a sapling on their behalf today. Yeah, big round of applause to Mr. Apurva as well. Once again, thanks to Prakash Kochar and company for these mementos. Thank you, all 3 of you, for making this session so special.